So tomorrow, King of Kings, the triumph and tragedy of Emperor Haile Selassie I of Ethiopia will be released. It's a landmark biography of his life, written by his great-nephew, Prince Asfa-Wossen Asserate. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right.
And he spent his childhood and adolescence in Ethiopia before fleeing the revolution of 1974. Well, Asfa-Wossen is a best-selling author, political analyst and consultant on African and Middle Eastern affairs and joins me in the studio now. Welcome to you. Now, Emperor Haile Selassie was quite a formidable character. What inspired you to write this book?
I think there are two major things that made me write this book. First, I thought he was treated very unfairly in the 70s, and people like Kapuscinski wrote about the wealth he had accumulated, that he was a dictator, he didn't care a lot about his people and all that.
Okay.
Of course, there was the other side. You had also people saying that he was a demigod and was the greatest man that has ever lived. And I thought the truth is somewhere in between. And I hoped that we would be able to get a book where you could show to the rest of the world his strength and also his weaknesses.
Now, during your time in Ethiopia, before you left, you knew him personally, didn't you? And you gained a bit of an insight into the imperial court and its controversial politics. Were you able to sort of give us an insight through the book of his more personable character?
Absolutely. This is my entire relationship to him was a familiar one. I never held a governmental post, and whatever I knew about Ethiopian politics was due to the fact that I had a very close relationship with my father, who was one of the leading politicians of that time. And because of that open relationship, and because I was interested in politics from a very early age, I was able to suck all the information from him, for which I am incredibly grateful.
And how easy or difficult has it been, whilst you've been gathering the research and all the information through the archives, to actually get all the information that you needed to tell his story?
Well, first of all, as far as the Ethiopian archives, the archives of the imperial court and the archives of the Ministry of the Pen, as it was called in those days, are concerned, I'm afraid they're scattered throughout the world, and I only got very few papers, which I also have put in this book. But the others, after a 30-year period, I was able to go into the archives in Europe and America and also here in Great Britain. But I also had the opportunity of interviewing people who were closely associated with the emperor, who were his ministers, and who knew about Ethiopian politics during the imperial era.
Now, I mean, he ruled for over 4 decades. What political tactics did he employ in order to stay in power for that long?
Well, he was a wily politician, and he played the game of the neutral country in a magnificent way. Don't forget, this man was not only revered in the West, in the East he was called the anti-fascist on the throne. So he really played an incredible role in furthering Ethiopia's cause on both sides. And of course, one of the greatest roles he played was that of a founding member of the non-aligned movement and the founding member of the United Nations, and of course as father of the Organization of African Unity.
And he's also a descendant of King Solomon as well. Have you tell us any more about that?
Well, the Ethiopian Crown is the oldest crown in the world, the oldest dynasty, lasting, coming from Queen of Sheba and Solomon, and the first-born son was the first emperor of Ethiopia, Menelik I. And Haile Selassie I was the 225th monarch from that direct line.
And what surprises can we expect when we read this book, that perhaps lesser-known facts or interesting things about him and his life?
Perhaps the fact that the late emperor of Ethiopia was a fantastic snooker player.
Oh, really? Did you ever have a game with him?
Well, not me myself. I was standing there, and this is one of the very few times in my life where I had opportunity of seeing him as an ordinary human being who was enjoying himself, and I was absolutely flabbergasted to see how brilliantly he won the game against the people who he was playing at. And there again, immediately after the game was over, I gave him his jacket, and he turned back into the Emperor of Ethiopia.
Wow. And was he a keen sportsman in general? Did he have a keen interest in sports?
In his youth, obviously, he was a good rider, and he played what you would call hockey. There's a game called Genna in Ethiopia, and Guks. These are very traditional Ethiopian sports. But in latter years, apart from riding a bit, I did not know that he was a sportsman.
Okay, but a very good snooker player.
Yes.
So your book's going to be released tomorrow. Would you like to hold it up and tell us where people can get hold of a copy should they like to read it?
Well, I think you can get hold of it anywhere in the bookshops, and I think it's also on Amazon, and I hope people will like it.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time.
No, thank you for having me here.